Welcome to 3, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. I'm Gill, host of Monday Match Analysis, with outstanding tennis journalists Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. This is episode 4, and we start with the same topic we started the last 2 shows with, because we have more news about Rafa Nadal, and this time it is definitive. He is not in the entry list for the U.S. Open. It looks like, well, it doesn't look like, Nadal will not be traveling to New York. So, Amy, you said that it would kind of eat Nadal inside to make this decision. Now he's made the decision. What do you make of it?
He probably feels really good about it right now. He's thinking he made the safe decision, especially when, you know, you read the news every day and there's people calling for the U.S. Open not to be held. And, you know, there's people dropping out every day, Kiki Bertens, it's just not safe. So he probably feels pretty good right now. When it's going to eat him alive is when they actually do hold the tournament and everything's going pretty smoothly, which I predict will happen. And they are starting to compete on court, and he's not out there.
Yeah, I would say, though, nothing that he hasn't experienced before. And I don't know if Nadal watches the tour when he is unable to play with injury, but it reminds me of Andrei Rublev. He told Noah Rubens behind the racket that when he had his terrible back injury, it made him terribly upset to watch professional tennis because he couldn't be out there. So, I don't disagree with you. I think it'll be hard for Nadal to watch the U.S. Open. But again, I look at this a lot like an injury for a lot of players.
Yeah,
almost
and
like that.
You know, you could say that maybe he'll go fishing and he won't watch it all and he'll just work out on clay. But he's got to actually scout for the French Open because that's not going to be too far away, and he's going to be needing to see his competitors and what kind of shape they're in and do they have any new tools in the toolbox. So he's going to have to watch it. He's going to be forced, really.
How much do you think he's going to have to watch? How much do you think he's going to be watching?
Probably not too much, but, he'll probably take in the Djokovic matches.
That's a great point.
But, if I were him at this point, I would probably there would be a sliver of me that would be hoping that they actually call the tournament off. And I'm not saying that because Nadal is vindictive at all. It's just human nature. If it were me, if I'm not going to the party, I kind of hope that the party gets canceled.
Wow, golly. I don't think that sliver. I think what Nadal's going to be doing is practicing, relaxing, gathering his energy. I think Amy had great points about the wanting to do some scouting just to kind of see the tennis, even though it's funny to think, why does Rafael Nadal need to scout Novak Djokovic, who's played more than 50 times? And yet, that's your human nature. It's like, I just want to listen to that music once again. I don't think he's hoping that the tournament gets canceled. I think the pro players are funny. They don't often want to admit to watching tennis, but they sure know what happens in the tennis. So what do they get? Like some chip that comes into their mind that says, oh, yeah, these are the results. It's like they kind of don't want to admit it. So he'll probably watch some and watch a match here and there, and then get back to his practice. And now, of course, the little X factors that the Madrid event got canceled, which was going to happen right after the U.S. Open. So Rafa won't have as much training match play as he hopes. So I don't know. I think it's really the sad thing is it's really fun to watch him play. I mean, look, he's 1/3 of our show, and the chance to just see him compete, whether it's on clay or grass or hard courts or crushed glass or anything, that we don't have that's really sad. He's the defending champ. I mean, I'm trying to think back. Sampras wins in 2002 and he doesn't come back. I'm trying to remember if Nadal played in 2014. Yeah, did he miss it that year because of injury? It's funny, we lose track of these injuries.
What about like 2009 Wimbledon? Nadal couldn't defend.
That's right. Yeah, I was at the press conference when he announced he couldn't play that year. And that was really sad. That was definitely sad. That was really upsetting to see. And that was a hard year for him, for Nadal, yeah. 2009.
I've read in Nadal's book that there was some injury that he had early in his career, and he sat in a chair and was having the ball fed to him as he sat in a chair because it was something, his lower body was injured. And people point to that like young players coming up or whatever, and they think, gosh, if I'm injured, Rafael Nadal sat in a chair and hit balls.
Thomas Muster did that one too with the knee. There's some famous B-roll of that, of Muster doing that. Like, was he wailing forehands while he's sitting in a chair?
So we tend to think of Rafa as like this warrior god that always does the right thing, and he'll find a way to battle through missing the US Open and not being able to defend his championship. I see a human being, and I think it's going to be hard for him.
Well, since you hinted at that, I kind of see that, though he made his decision, it'll still kind of like tweak at him a little bit while that's going on, and certain results and certain players. And yet at the same time, he knows he's pointing towards that French Open, towards Roland Garros.
Do you think it's a competitive advantage? Do you think Nadal not playing New York increases his chances in Paris?
All day. That was the whole point from the jump when we started talking about this.
I would agree.
This was the pragmatic choice. You know, it's like, do I go to the picnic or the party? And I think he made that was exactly what it's about. It's about physical preservation. I mean, he's one of the most unbelievable players ever, but he's 34 and pounding on hard courts, flying, pandemic, quarantine, bubbles, all this kind of stuff that makes it hard. It's like, you know what? Nope. I'm going to just focus on what I need to focus on. And as we see, some other players are also making that choice too, like Amy McKeeky-Burtons, and I think Svitolina and some others aren't playing the Open either.
You know, it's all like perfectly laid out, and we think, oh, Rafa made the right decision for his body and for the pandemic, and he'll focus on clay and he'll go into the French Open full steam ahead. But I think he's set up a little bit of a pressure situation for himself. Not that he can't handle it, but let's say that Djokovic wins the US Open and is looking primo and in great shape and goes in with lots of confidence and momentum into Roland Garros. And Rafa doesn't have much match play in his, warm-up, and goes in there, and he's kind of put the pressure on himself. Okay, I'm here. I skipped. I'm on clay now. I got to do it. So it's fraught, I think.
As people say these days, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more, Amy. In a way, it is kind of interesting. It's a little bit being on a game show, and you decide which prize you're going to take. Like there's a show before you go, let's make a deal, and you decide, I'm going to take the radar range in the refrigerator, I think, but and next thing you know, right, you kind of lose. You may lose out on the whole thing, but that's true. That's absolutely true.
Or you can take what's behind curtain number 3. Gill, right. You remember this, right?
No.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the curtain number 3.
Well, okay. So
you're right.
Speaking of which, you want to know what I also don't remember? What? A major in which neither Federer nor Nadal is in the draw, because it hasn't happened since 1999. But that's
you were born, Gill, when?
Yes, 99. 99.
When were you born? 99.
Yes. That's
right. Now, last time a major did not feature these two guys was the 1999 U.S. Open. Wow.
That's right. Yep.
Wow. Well, there you have it.
So perhaps now, okay, obviously Novak Djokovic at face value, the gut reaction is that he's the beneficiary of that, although it's been a really long time since he's lost to Federer or Nadal on a hard court. 2014 for Federer, 2013 for Nadal, since Djokovic has lost on a hard court, respectively. But for sure, it might be an opening for the other guys. So we thought today that we'd talk about some of the big 3 foils. And let's go kind of through the generations and discuss these groups. The groups that some of them won slams, but they never really challenged the big 3 on a consistent basis in the biggest matches. We kind of start with this first crop. you got to start with Federer's early rivals when Nadal and Djokovic weren't really at the top of their games yet. They were too young. You have kind of the Roddick, Safin, Hewitt, and a lot of those players are actually characterized as kind of just a weaker field, but I don't know if that's entirely fair because you can't blame Federer for dominating them.
Well, the strong weak field thing is right. The strong weak field thing, you don't know yeah, you sort of seem weak if I'm beating you all the time, but are you strong if you're beating me? Am I weak then? So that group, yeah, those are what Federer was born in 1981. So I guess we'd call all these guys the 80 through 82s, like Safin and Hewitt, who early on had a lot of wins over Federer because Federer was getting his pieces together. But those other guys all have their own limits. They only went so far. I mean, Safin 2 slams and kind of mercurial and up and down. Hewitt, very solid, but kind of, I think of him like a one-term president. You know, like he had to go, but he wasn't that sustainable. Roddick kind of too. So I don't know. What do you of those three, Amy? Which player did you most enjoy watching play, or even try to challenge Federer?
I just sit here, and as you said that, so many good thoughts, Joel. But how crazy is this sport that you can go all the way to the top of the sport? You can win 2 Grand Slams, and we're talking about you on this show that we call 3. We're talking about you like you're just meh. Like, yeah, he only won 2 Grand Slams. I mean, that just blows my mind. Anybody who's ever struck a tennis ball will be blown away by that. I mean, but to answer your question, Joel, in this country, so many people remember Roddick and the great player that he was and the great human being really that he is. And yet, Federer got the best of him. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of meh, unfortunately.
Well, it's just sports. I mean, actually, and it's kind of okay to say that in sports because it's a game. And people perform. And in baseball, there are guys, it's like you were talking last time, the guys who win multiple rings and the guys who don't. It's like talking about Isaiah Thomas on that show compared to, let's say, Michael Jordan.
Well, hey, I mean, they have major titles. If you look at the next crop, they don't. And of course, that has a lot to do with the rise of Djokovic and Nadal. And now you have 3 of these guys to deal with instead of just one of them. You have now Bandian, Berdych, Tsonga, and then you have Ferrer. I always found this common thread that was kind of interesting with everyone but Ferrer. There were a lot of players at one point who I thought could hit the ball with the big 3. Like if you played baseline rallies down the middle and you watch Tomas Berdych, incredible ground strokes. I wouldn't know who's better if he's hitting with Novak Djokovic down the middle. But all these guys lacked mobility. And there was just this massive crop of players who just didn't have the mobility that they had. They hit the ball just as well. They had the offense, but the defense wasn't there.
And then you had Ferrer, who could move.
Opposite.
Yeah, good field, less hit.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, that's really interesting, Gill. And I do think that there's something to the adage in any sport that defense wins championships. But to me, what the big 3 had that all those foils did not have is presence of mind during the point. Like if you watch Federer, how does he know that the ball is going to be hit there and what to do with it next? He just has, in the moment, he has that presence of mind that is just next level. And the other 2 have it as well.
Well, that's where I think it helps to see the game. You know, I get the offense defense thing, and I use that language a lot too, but I think it only takes us to a point. And you kind of see the ways. It's like, for example, of the 3, okay, you look at Novak, and it reminds me of what I think of Chris Evert. Novak, is that game offense or defense? Like Novak, that first ball is an inch inside the baseline. The second ball is an inch inside the baseline. Third ball. By the time the guys hit 4 balls inside 3 inches of your baseline, you ask if you have the right to a lawyer. Who's offense and who's defense? And I think your point is great, Amy, in that you're getting to how the 3 kind of transcend both. You know, it's like Nadal. clay court or like Nadal. Look at how he stands so far back to return, and which we think is defense, and then suddenly it's offense. So it's like, what the heck? It's kind of like these guys have taken the game to a new dimension, whereas the offense shown by Berdych and Tsonga, firepower for sure in a contemporary way, but not quite the grand synthesis that these maybe, nor the grand Tsitsipas, sorry, that these guys brought to us, this ability to kind of transcend offense and defense. Because I think, like Berdych is a great example. I mean, I watched him beat Federer at Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, but it's like then the next, or Del Potro, who had his moments. I guess Del Potro a little later in the generation, but it's really fascinating.
And some people, when we had our Andy Murray episode, it was our first one, were upset that it wasn't the Stan episode, because they said, what about Stanimal? Also with the 3 major titles, I would put Stan into that camp almost, right? Because he had all that firepower, but he doesn't flow between offense and defense or hybrid it, right? You can counterattack. You can create offense from a defensive position. I think you put it nicely, though. You added nuance to it, Joel. Wawrinka's another guy. I think same deal. That's the thing
that. By the way, just to tell people, look at it, and I think, Amy, I think you'll back me up here. The Stan Murray comparison, 3 majors, yes. If you look at all the other data, and each had Davis Cup, all the other data, Murray carries all the other states. Would you agree with that, Amy?
Yes, but I did think that those people had a fair point.
Yes.
Stan is always being overlooked, maybe because he's a countryman of Federer. But and let's not talk about Stan in the past either. I mean, he's not done. Right. He's still playing. I saw his workout on Instagram today. He's working on the backhand. I mean, I think obviously he's older, but he stands a great foil for these guys. I mean, how many great matches have we seen in the closing arguments of these slams where Stan's involved?
Absolutely, yeah. And he, he's gonna. I think he carries. It's funny. I just read Murray on data, Stan on appeal, because Stan, the Murray game, Murray is like, he becomes like a pale replicant of Djokovic stylistically, whereas Stan brings the backhand and some of the shot making was like kind of sui generis, kind of his own deal of game, and that carried a lot of appeal, and also a late blooming surprise. Murray was a U.S. Open junior champ who eventually found his legacy and got his Lendl and got his coaching, and he's great. I mean, Murray I think would call the 4th, but Stan as a 5th or a 4th or a right in their foil, and certainly more so with 3 majors than a whole bunch of these other people.
And don't you think Stan plays the way people want to play, or people enjoy playing? Hit every ball as hard as you can?
I don't know, Amy, you got the. I mean, I use my one-hander. Well, Amy, you're working on your one-hander. What do you think?
Oh yeah, and I just got some great advice. I sent the video of my one-handed backhand to a tour-level coach who I will remain nameless, and had him look at it and analyze it. So I just have new respect for these guys. But with Stan, the thing that I love about him is this thing and the tattoo. Ever fail, try again, whatever the tattoo says. I mean, that's all of us, right? He's every man.
But also he's every man, though, with Murray plays a little bit more of the everyman game that's kind of lunch pail and problem solving. But Stan can kind of light it up. I mean, that backhand is like the tennis version of a 3-pointer, isn't it?
And his forehand is better.
Forehand's better.
Yes.
Which some people don't recognize.
I did a statistical analysis at the French Open a couple of years ago, and the thing that people just go gaga over Stan's backhand, rightfully so, because it really is a work of art. But Stan statistically will run around that backhand.
You need to.
Yeah, and hit forehand, which is just a monster.
Like Thiem, just like Dominic Thiem, and Justine Anna took her game to another level when you got to run around that backhand, you got to crack the forehand.
And Nadal does it too. He's one of the best in the business at running
absolutely.
Around.
That's right. Well, look, if you have a choice, if you have a choice between a big forehand and a big backhand, take the big forehand.
For sure. Otherwise you're Benoit Paire.
Yeah, good point, Gill.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the mental. I think that's a big thing in terms of Stan's development. He had a lot more belief by the time he turned about 27, 28 years old, starting in like 2014, something changed with the way he played the big three. He played them with confidence. He didn't disengage when things weren't going his way like he did when he was a younger player. A lot of people talk about kind of the mental factor, the intimidation factor. And oftentimes when players like Raonic or Dimitrov are brought up, Nishikori is kind of the third member of what are referred to as the lost gen. You do wonder if they really went for the jugular and had the mental game, the belief, the confidence, the bravado to step onto the court with a legend and to really believe that they were going to win.
Maybe
do you believe that they lack that?
I think what it's about is you start to feel that you're playing the resume, you're playing the marquee, you're playing the person who's generating all the revenue. And if you looked at, it'd be interesting to track how the popularity of these guys, for example, the first generation, the Safins and Hewitts, hey, I grew up with Roger. I grew up with you. I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. You're not Roger Federer yet. You haven't IPO'd. Then comes the Tsonga, Berdych, a little younger. So maybe by the time Nishikori and Raonic, and especially baby-fed Dimitrov surface, they're already existing in grave reverence. A pro told me once, there used to be a magazine, World Tennis, and he told me when he turned pro, he'd been so used to reading World Tennis magazine and seeing these pictures, he'd get World Tennis by, he'd play an older player who he'd seen on the cover of this magazine. So is that the lost generation, is that their deal? It's like, I arrive on the circuit and these guys are in full-bloodied glory. I can't. Oh my God. So I can't even think of deposing them. And Nishikori kind of plays like a version of a Djokovic. Dimitrov is a baby fed. I'm just a mimic.
Yeah. I think Dimitrov probably grew up idolizing, maybe too strong of a word, but clearly grew up in the Federer generation and wanting to play like him. I think he's admitted that.
Yes.
And then to actually be on court with him, and then while you're kind of coming into your own on tour, these guys' legend is just growing, and they're becoming the big three that they are. So it's like these guys never had a chance.
Well, they already were for the earlier generations, they were on the way to becoming the big three. But then by the time the Dimitrov, Nishikori, they were there kind of. So in a way, that was kind of hard for them. And when you play someone who plays like you but does it a little bit better, as Ferrer would find out versus Nadal, it's just like it's tough to beat someone who's a little bit better than you, who plays like you, because you don't have any other. What do I have that you don't have? And you're running my offense better, and it's very demoralizing. So that generation, it's funny though, just how these generations fly by. They make their go, they get one of them gets a good win. You beat a Novak in Indian Wells or Acapulco or something, and then it's like, like a Raonic beat Federer at Wimbledon. Remember in 16 in the semis, then, whew.
Or maybe you do beat them. Somebody does beat one of the guys at a slam, but then there's one of the other three sitting there waiting.
That's right. I know.
Yeah.
It's just, so now you come on to so now we move into the next generation, the next foils, which I guess we're looking at Kyrgios and Zverev and, even Tsitsipas, a little younger, but, who else we got in there?
There's Medvedev bursting onto the scene, and then Dominic Thiem, just a late bloomer. I mean, he's older than them, but he's also almost lumped in with them as kind of the who's going to win a slam under 30 years old.
Late bloomer as much as I think he's just been a fine performer. So he's outstretched his year of birth. Do you know what I mean? He's done better than some people his age, so he's continued to excel. So so it's like, yeah, he's right. He's older than them, but he's younger than Nishikori And we haven't mentioned, by the way, one slammer, Marin Cilic, who had a little fling at the U.S. Open.
Who to me fits into Berdych Tsonga prototype. Great ball striker, wasn't the athlete or isn't the athlete.
Wasn't the mover athlete.
Mover. Yes, moving athlete.
Less more of a shaker than a mover. Yeah.
Right. So I guess the question we want to get out here with the next gen is, how are they different, perhaps better than the lost gen? I mean, they do have the advantage of the big three being older, but beyond that, I do think that in there you have some really special players, and particularly I think Tsitsipas and Dominic Thiem are really close to being slam ready.
Well, and also and Medvedev, who played the great final with Nadal at the Open. I think I think Gill, you really hit on something. I think this whole movement aspect, because now we're seeing you can almost like see the videos coming to shape of kind of the little robotic movements of a Berdych, the little laziness of a Tsonga with some of the footwork. And now we're getting guys like, Medvedev, who's a wonderful mover. It's a great mover. And also a tactical nuisance in a way none of the others have been. I don't know. Amy, what do you think of Tsitsipas?
I think Tsitsipas is a great player, exciting, really cool personality. None of these guys, though, are like Federer and Nadal are with their net skills. It's funny how, like, a lot of this next gen, this Medvedev team, they're really still aggressive baseliners. So they've kind of taken the Djokovic school of thought approach to their game.
So it's very much in the contemporary game. Yeah, okay.
I think Tsitsipas is above tour average pretty solidly, and I think he wants to be a good volleyer. I think he likes to come in, and he's performing at its best when he's not trying to do too much with the forehand, and he's hitting it as more of an approach shot than an outright winner where the errors start to creep in. I'm actually really concerned, or not really concerned, that's a little bit too extreme, but I have questions about Medvedev's forehand and his ability to generate offense. And you got to remember with Daniil, as incredible as his run last summer was, and not only to the U.S. Open finals, but making 6 finals in a row when it comes to tournaments that he entered in, the sample size is still pretty tiny with him. He hasn't been a top 10 level player for all that long.
So you're worried that he might had that little window. It's kind of like the book wasn't on him. And now the scouting report is out, and now we're going to really see what it goes from being, like we said, the familiar, from being the hunter to being the hunted. And there's a little bit of well, I guess we'll see. And then we'll see how he copes with it. And again, this pandemic has given such an odd pause to everything. So it'll be interesting he'll be interested to see at the U.S. Open. We'll see at the U.S. Open. Next thing you know, he's struggling in the third set with Tommy Paul, let's say, or Taylor Fritz, and what's going on with that match. And here's Medvedev, last year's it boy. Now he's struggling.
Well, I'll give you an example, and I still think he's exceptional. But when he played Stan at the Australian Open this year, Stan has his block returns, no pace, right? Middle of the court, deep, no pace. Medvedev doesn't have the racket speed to do anything with the ball. So it's a very physical style he has to play. There's no easy way to end the points.
Well, it's a little bit like I always thought about Radwanska. I always thought it'd be interesting if someone like Radwanska had played Amanda Kutzer or Arantxa Sanchez. So instead of Radwanska playing these nice hitting people who she could absorb and redirect, which is kind of what Medvedev does, someone says here, or Gill Simone is like that. Like I always thought Gill Simone had the forehand was a bluff, a pro. We're talking pros, I get it, but if someone just gave him nothing to his forehand, but they didn't, and so that allowed him to do. So I don't know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I like that Radwanska analogy. That's pretty spot on. Federer did say once about Simone in a post-match press conference that he could never play like that. It was one of those rare moments where something kind of snarky came out of Roger's mouth.
The king.
Yeah, exactly. But Yeah, Medvedev had that great run at last year's U.S. Open. So Gill, you're right. Like, let's see what he does now, a year from now, after the pandemic.
And now the one guy we haven't mentioned is amazingly Zverev, who was really the first to break out onto the scene. And like his progress has just, in a lot of ways, kind of stalled. And he has the second serve issues, and the forehand can go awry. And he had the issue where he kept playing 5-setters early in slams and just tiring himself
semis
out.
of the Australian Open this year.
Yep.
Got that semi, found that was a breakthrough. But yeah, he was a real it boy a few years ago. It's like he's like the guy who was the high school kid taking college classes, and he seemed like on the honors track. And then it's like, well, wait a second. Oh, now I'm in the dorms and I'm kind of on school, but it's not quite happening. But the battle, again, it's a marathon. It's a long journey, but he has some of the arsenal that you spoke about. I mean, and when you compare him to, let's say, Berdych, there's some more mobility, more of the contemporary game, the backhand, the serve, a little more. But yeah, again, the forehand.
He's Murray without the movement, though. He's Murray without the movement.
Maybe he's Murray. That's interesting. Murray without the movement, as opposed to he's Berdych with a little more movement. Yeah, okay.
And statistically, I know that Zverev doesn't do as well in 5-set matches, but does very well in best of 3. So, some of the people have talked about his conditioning. I don't know, though. We'll see. Joel, you mentioned before that it's like the high school kid who took college classes, and you probably did that, Gill, so we won't. we won't. But Joel, like, what happens to that kid? Because that kid missed out on high school some.
Well, but he did it, but he deserved it. I mean, he was generating some good results. I mean, he almost beats Nadal when he's a teenager at Indian Wells. He's starting to win some tournaments. He's getting into the top 10. But I think this stuff about 5-setters, that even he's been befuddled at mental, physical. And speaking of it, do you see who is Gill? Isn't he working with David Ferrer, your guy?
Yeah, it was a trial basis, and but already based on his play in UTS, it seems like Ferrer has him flattening out the forehand a little bit more and kind of exaggerating the take back a la Del Potro. So already it looks like they've made some changes.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how those things work with those guys. Sometimes get the coach to fill in the missing puzzle piece. So you get a guy who's a little languid and lacks the urgency. I want the small coach to make me play. The tall player wants the smaller coach to make me play smaller. I'm a smaller guy. I want the bigger coach. Gill, I want you to be coached by Del Potro. That's how.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah, I agree.
Dynamic.
Is there anyone, real quick, maybe not, is there anyone pre-next gen that we have our eye on?
You mean, wait, who's the player from Spain? Alcaraz, the young player.
Alcaraz.
Yeah, he's kind of hit the screen a little bit, and we're kind of seeing, because again, when they're that young, they're still promising. It's like, to get back to the school analogy, every high schooler could be a Rhodes Scholar. When you're in high school, you think you might have a perfect GPA.
I really like Sinner. Is he next gen or is he pre-next gen?
I think you're right.
Is he formerly?
I'll give him pre. Him pre.
Yeah. The Italians are really excited about him. He's a great athlete, and I think there's going to be a lot of money, and the Italian National Federation, they're going to get behind him. So he's one to watch.
He's got the biggest two-hander I've seen in. Based on the tape, I don't think anyone really hits it as big as him.
Is it scary? Massive. Is it scary? That's what you always. It's funny. I swear, I wish I had kept a database over the years. It's like a board game of the words you hear when a player is at that stage. Yeah, scary, money, backhand's money, and then they get those early wins, and then they hit the yip. It's like, I don't know, kind of nervous, dodgy, forehand, dodgy. Scary to dodgy, and then they kind of regain it, and they put it, like with Zverev now, we're watching the guy who's kind of finally like, I think he might be ready to declare the major. He's kind of okay, but we'll see. And they go through these phases. I'm not saying declare the major like he's going to be an honors student. I just mean now he's at least maybe torn off all the cobwebs, and he's going to have the legitimate career he's meant to have. It's like he's going to shear off all the expectation and all the early hype that we generate. and get down to it.
As we covered at the top, it'll be a strange U.S. Open without Federer and Nadal. That means extra chances for all of the foils we just discussed, although Djokovic will still be the #1 seed. So this has been a lot of fun. Of course, we are now on Apple Podcasts, your favorite podcast platforms. This was episode 4. Very exciting. Rate and review. Subscribe to the channel. It is a huge help, and we really appreciate it. We'll see you next time in the next episode of 3.